It'll be on YouTube.
Oh, what's your name?
Just the name you got down here. It's SPC.
SPC. Oh, there we go. That one. Hey, there I am. Okay. You ready? Or are we live?
Yep, we are live right now. So.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, if you want to go ahead and get started, we can.
All righty. Well, what is going on, my specialist SPC here, and welcome back to the Midwest Cantina podcast. Today, I've got a very special guest. He is probably one of my favorite movie critic YouTubers going right now. I'd like to please introduce Mr. Sean Chandler.
Hey, I'm excited to be here and get to talk movies and YouTube. Anytime I actually get to interact with someone, it's a lot of fun. Since I'm just talking to a camera by myself, so I seem a little bit like a crazy person. But now there's a person that can respond back to me, and that's always exciting.
Well, that's why I wanted to reach out to you, because every time I watch your videos, I always end up like talking to you anyway. So I figured, you know what? Let's reach out. Let's just see what happens, man. And you responded, and here we are.
Here we are.
It's been 2 weeks in the making, and I'm excited, man. So I suppose, why don't we just jump right on into the topic? So Shawn, can you please tell us, how did you first get started on YouTube?
Yeah, so I first started actually like 7 or 8 years ago and watched all the other people that were kind of doing this stuff. John Cambria, stuff on Collider, Jeremy Johns, Chris Stuckman, Flickinger, all the people everyone else watches, and went, oh, I can do that too. And so got on, put a couple videos up, and as it turns out, it's a little bit more difficult than that. So I thought that I could just super simple, just put some stuff out. And it just takes a lot more than that to get going. So I posted a couple videos, took 6 months off, posted a couple more videos, and did that pattern for like 3-4 years straight. Then summer 2016, went to go see that new Ghostbusters movie. I didn't have a job, and everyone had these big, gigantic opinions about it, or it's the worst movie ever made, or if you don't like it, that means you're a sexist. And I saw it and I went, I'm just kind of right here on the middle on it. So that's kind of interesting. Posted a review, and apparently Ghostbusters 2016 changed my life, because here I am. It's my full-time job now.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely enjoy pretty much everything you put out. I mean, also congratulations to you as well on 152,000 subscribers.
Thank you. Yes, as it turns out, like, things slowed down for me a little bit for about 6 months after last summer. Just kind of, not that it was bad or anything like that, but just wasn't kind of growing. And then now that everyone's locked at home, the growth has started again. So maybe of all the bad things going on in the world, there's a little bit of a positive.
Right. So I guess leading into my next question, obviously you already answered one of them, but what's the thing that really keeps you like going, wanting to make more and more content?
Well, I think some of it's just kind of the way I'm wired a little bit. I've always been a person that creates things. Mm-hmm. I like feeling at the end of the day, a new thing exists because of what I did today. So all the way back to when the late 90s, when I was in high school, I put up a Jackie Chan webpage, and it would be like, oh, I should write a review. And they were terrible. And some, like, you can still find them like on the Internet Wayback Machine and stuff like that. But like, I watched the movie and I put my thoughts out there. And then I was in a number of bands in the early zeros. And the feeling of like, I wrote a song today. I recorded a demo of it. That's always been something that's motivated me. And then even, when I had separate jobs from this, where I'd have like a full day of work, and then I'd come home and I'd want to create something just for myself, something that exists just because for my purposes. So whether that was a certain point, some point in time that I was still doing music, other times that was blogs and other writing projects I did. And then it turned into YouTube about 3.5 years ago, almost 4 years ago. So some of it's just that kind of drive that I love to have something tangible to show for a day's work. And the other side to it is that I've always kind of been driven to go to the internet to kind of meet some of my social needs. I'm an introvert. I don't really, people kind of freak me out a little bit. I don't, big loud parties and stuff. That's not my thing. Big crowds. But it doesn't mean I don't want to talk about the things I'm interested in. I want to talk about them quite a bit. So I've always been someone that's gone to the internet, and, even just yesterday, I guess a week ago, took a family picture for Easter and put on as kind of a joke. I just put on a cowboy hat because I live in Texas, but I don't wear a cowboy hat. But I bought one many years back, and I was just reflecting on it a little bit. I bought it when the first time I ever met some of my internet friends from a message board over 15 years ago. And then I met someone in that context, and we both went out and bought cowboy hats. And then I made a post recently about hitting 30 million views on my YouTube channel. And that friend of mine kind of like commented, because we're still Facebook friends, and she's like, "Hey, I saw your Easter picture, saw that you were, you still have your cowboy hat." I was like, "Yep, that's the one I bought." And so I've just always been a person that goes to the internet to connect with people about things I'm interested in. And that's turned into my love of movies that, my wife doesn't like, she doesn't mind talking about movies with me or watching movies or anything like that, but it's not on the depth. She's not interested in going in deep on, let's sit around and talk about our favorite characters in the MCU. That's not what she wants to do with free time. And so there's a lot of things like that I just kind of drives me to kind of have those conversations. And, now that's what I do for a living. It's pretty easy to be motivated to keep doing it because it's how I make my money.
Yeah. I'm sure, obviously, of course, there's some, like behind the scenes stuff. Obviously, it's not always going to be, a walk in the park making videos or, trying to come up with more and more ideas. So, I mean, I guess for you, what are kind of like your ups and downs of doing YouTube?
The people. It's always the people. It's the best and the worst parts are the people. So, before we started on here, you mentioned enjoying Cody Leach's YouTube channel. So Cody Leach has a channel that's more focused kind of on horror. He's one of my best YouTube friends. We talk movies on Facebook almost every single day, and have for 3 years now, 3.5 years, a very long time in terms of, our YouTube careers. And so meeting people like that, that's great. And then now with kind of where my channel is at, almost every single day, someone messages me and they say, "Hey man, I love your channel. I started my own YouTube channel. You inspired me." That's awesome when I hear that. Or someone says, I always enjoyed movies, but I found your channel just on some Marvel ranking, and just your passion for movies was infectious. And so I kept watching a bunch of your videos, and it made me love movies more and check out more movies. Or a big one real recently has been back in January. I did both my favorite movies of all time and my favorite movies of the decade. And on both of them, I had this movie called Warrior. That it's a very underwatched movie that stars Joel Edgerton and Tom Hardy. It's an MMA sports movie. I just love it. And so it's the movie I always recommend to people if they're just looking for kind of a generic recommendation. So I mentioned in these videos back in January, and in virtually every single day since then, I had someone messaging me saying, "Hey man, so glad you recommended Warrior. I loved it." Literally almost every single day for 4 months straight. It's easily probably 100 times someone said that, or someone shares on Instagram, "Hey, just watched Warrior based off Sean Chandler's recommendation. Loved it." And I love to hear that. Just getting people to discover something they're passionate about, inspiring them to talk about movies. All of that stuff is just really cool. Or just, getting to talk movies with people and, be a positive influence is amazing. On the negative side, though, as it turns out, YouTube and Twitter have a lot of very toxic people too.
Yes, sir.
And the bigger you get, obviously, the more you get of that, just as a simple multiplier of everything. It just multiplies out. The more people you're around, the more people you're going to encounter some of this. And also, once you get to a certain size, people operate, they don't think you're actually going to read the comment. They don't think you're actually going to reply. Or in some cases, they think that you will reply. They just don't really care. Or they start to see you as a personality rather than a person. And so there's just a lot of kind of odd things that come about because of all of that. That's very frustrating. You know, there's like an odd deal that happened back in December, and sometimes I'm not very good. I'm trying to get better at not engaging trolls, not taking the bait on some of this stuff. But like back in December, everyone was asking me to watch Marriage Story, and I wasn't in a rush to do that. My parents got divorced. It wasn't a particularly enjoyable part of my childhood. And so a movie that has great acting and a realistic portrayal of divorce involving a child, not exactly what I'm rushing out to see. And so it kind of turned into, I posted that, and then some people were like, oh yeah, but you know, it says amazing acting. It's a great movie. And I was like, I believe you, but everything you're saying is why I don't want to watch it. That just sounds like a terrible experience to me. And, you know, I baited people a little bit in the way that I kind of overstated some of that. And then it kind of turned into people being like, well, this is your job, dude. Like, you're not going to review a movie just because you don't want to? Well, this is your job. I was like, what's my job? What are you talking about? I don't have a job. I work for myself. I have a YouTube channel where I cover what I want to cover. And family dramas aren't really my niche. So like, what are you talking about? And so you have stuff like that that just, it's a little bit goofy to complain about it in the scheme of frustrating things about what people do for a living. People baiting you on Twitter and you taking the bait is very minor. But the best and the worst thing about YouTube is the people. And, you know, sometimes someone just says just the right criticisms or whatever that just gets under your skin. And it's frustrating. Especially like now, I can't get into my own comment section too much. Like right when I post videos, I try and be in there for about an hour and respond to as many people as I can. Mm-hmm. But then kind of long-term after that, people just assume I'm not going to read stuff. And they state things in a way that they wouldn't say it to my face because they assume they're just comment sectioning. And so like, this list is total crap. What kind of idiot would write this? And I go, well, sorry you didn't like it. And they're like, oh, sorry, man. Wasn't trying to throw shade. I didn't think you'd read this. well, I did. So why did you write it that way? And I've done all that stuff too. So it's interesting the way some of that plays out. But the people are great and the people are very frustrating.
Yeah, it's definitely a big thing on the internet. People seem to be a little more like confident when they're behind a computer screen instead of, you know, being right up on somebody, or like you and I like face to face right now. Like it seems like they get more of like a confidence boost to like say something in the comment section a lot.
I mean, I even try and play this out a little bit, and maybe this is my own arrogance or whatever, but you know, I'm over 6 feet tall. I'm over 200 pounds. And lift weights. Like I'm a pretty athletic person and not small. Mm-hmm. And I'll have people say this stuff with such confidence that and they're teenagers, I'm almost 40 years old. And so I'm thinking like on so many levels, if this person walked up to me and said this to my face, a fight wouldn't break out because I would go to jail. But if they were old enough that a fight could break out, a fight would break out because they're being so offensive. But they never would. They would never say that to my face. They would never say that to a 40-year-old man's face, and they certainly wouldn't say it to someone that is as taller than I am. And it's kind of bizarre. And you know, there's whatever that is that people think that that's okay, or they don't stop to think there's a person on the other side to it. Not one of the better things about the culture of YouTube. And I have people all the time, they'll like just say horrible things, and then I respond and they're like, oh, sorry, dude, I love your channel. What? Why did you write that? And I don't know. It's the ones that probably are the most frustrating to me that I haven't figured out how to properly process is that when people, they'll say they're meaning to like say something positive, but you're like, I really enjoy your channel, but like I just don't agree with this one. And they have like this long reason about why this video was terrible. And it's like, well, you could just post your own list. Like you don't have to tell me how much you don't like me, even though you really like me. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of stuff like that that's just the odd way that ways that people do things, or they make things more personal than they are. And it's like, let's just have a fun conversation about movies. We like different ones, cool. But you just made it personal with what you said. So
yeah, because like I know a couple days ago you posted a video of the top 10 movies everyone should see. And yeah. I know I went through and there were so many recommendations. I even posted on there. I said movies like The Shining, The Outsiders, The Crow, stuff like that. Like all, obviously, of course, big blockbuster movies. Yeah. But I mean, that's the fun part about doing this is, you know, like us, meeting new people, having good, lively conversations, and being able to talk about movies and just have a good time. If we disagree, we disagree. And if we agree, I mean, it'd be boring if everybody was the same in the world. If everybody thought like, let's figuratively say, the Ghostbusters from 2016. Let's just say if it was a masterpiece of cinema history, and everybody thought that, it just wouldn't even be fun anymore.
Yeah, and that's, I think, some of the stuff that frustrates me about the way that some people respond is that, like, I try and that's the language I always use in my lists and my rankings. I mean, it's my phrase. My list isn't the right list. It's just my list, and I would love to see yours. Or we're going to disagree. That's the fun part. Like I put that in my list entirely because I fully believe that. And so whenever people respond with your list is wrong, I'm like, well, is there a right list it's supposed to be? Are we all supposed to have your opinion? I just disagree with everything on this list. Well, okay, good, but it's a more fun conversation if you say, actually, I think that this character on this TV show is actually really good. Here's why. I thought that what they did in this season was and I wish there was more of that. Kind of the. I don't care at all about a list of titles and numbers next to it. It's the reasons, it's the arguments, it's the thoughts. That's what's interesting is that we all think different and we watch the same thing and we have a different experience with it, and it draws out different emotions from every single one of us. That's the fun and interesting part, is how we all have different perspectives and different things resonate with each one of us. And so that's what I want to talk about. Just being like, you're wrong. That's not even fun. This isn't a fun conversation. It's that, why am I wrong? What's the thing that you're disagreeing with, so we can have a back and forth?
Exactly. Because like, that's actually how I found you. I was looking up, it was right around the time when Solo, a Star Wars story, came out. So I wanted to see where everybody put it on their ranking list.
Right.
That was how I found you, because you were the first guy that popped up, and I'm like, oh, okay, let's check him out. And then kept going. And I'm like, okay, I like this. I mean, our lists are similar to a point, but then of course they kind of change and vary a little bit. But again, that was what made it fun. Like seeing what your list looked like to mine and being like, oh, okay, you know, I didn't look at it like that.
And we all have that thing that, Star Wars in particular, there's no right list. There's no way to make everybody happy. And I think a lot of that is generational. That's a big explanation for a chunk of it, because if you grew up on just the originals, you tend to be pretty frustrated by the prequels. If you grew up with the prequels, you tend to still be critical of the first two, but a lot of that generation that grew up on them loves Revenge of the Sith, especially the people, if you grew up with Clone Wars, that kind of answer some of the questions that my frustrations with Revenge of the Sith are resolved a lot by Clone Wars. But that doesn't change my experience of watching Revenge of the Sith in the theater for the first time with a bunch of my buddies. And we literally started laughing out loud at certain points in time. We were immature guys in our mid-20s. That's on us. But the movie had some faults too. And, but all of those Star Wars lists, I mean, there's just like, I try and as quick as possible, here's why this one is where it's at. And I can tell you why. Like that's what I think is why they enjoy my videos for the most part. And then you always have those people, I don't get it. Why is this one why is Revenge of the Sith at number 5 or 6 or whatever? That's the best one. Well, but I told you what didn't work for me in the video. It's not a full review, but I tell you in there, I didn't think that Anakin's fall worked, and that him screaming no, just it's not good. It's that's my reason. So you can tell me I'm wrong, but I just told you'd have to refute what I just said or give me a counter argument. Otherwise, there's nowhere for this conversation to go, because I'm not telling you to agree with me. I'm just telling you why this is just my list and why it is that way. So I wish we had more of the good conversations. That's what's more fun. And that's where I'm trying to do more stuff like this and try and be on more podcasts. Started my own podcast and, wanted to have a co-host on it so we can have the back and forth, so we can disagree. And, my buddy, I started doing a podcast, and the guy that's on there, he's 15 years younger than me, has he did kind of grow up more like on the prequels. He grew up, at that age where Nolan's Batman films are some of the first movies that he saw in the theater that were PG-13 and stuff like that. So he's a different perspective, and we can have that back and forth of how we see things differently. That I think that's where the fun happens, of respecting different opinions.
Yeah, I'm in that same boat with him. Like, I grew up watching the prequels. I mean, individually, I like them all, but it's very apparent that, there's obviously really not enjoyable things about them. And yeah, I grew up going to, like the Spider-Man movies, the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films, and going and enjoying those for the first time, because Spider-Man's my all-time favorite superhero. And yeah, definitely agree with the Dark Knight, the Christopher Nolan Batman films. I mean, I liked all of those. I mean, I'm sure if you and I did a ranking, I'm sure, you might have figuratively say Dark Knight Rises at the top and Dark Knight at the way bottom or whatever. I mean, like we were saying, this is what makes it fun, talking to other people. Where I used to have a coworker, and I told him I actually liked certain aspects of certain films, and he just looks at me and he's like, "Wow, well, I'm so sorry about that." I'm like, you like all these movies like Kung Fury, and I tell you everything I don't like about it, and you're like, "Oh, dude, it's a masterpiece. Are you serious?" So I'm like, well, I mean, where is it? Like,
wait, you don't like Kung Fury? Well, I'm done. I'm leaving the stream right now.
I'm sorry. I love it. I love it so much. Yeah, no, he recommends all these films. I go watch them. I don't like them, and he's just like, "How can you not like them?" I'm like, they're not my thing, man. Like,
especially stuff like that. That's niche. Like,
yeah,
I love the novelty of how weird that stuff is. Mm-hmm. But it's pretty obvious why a lot of people would watch it and be like, isn't this trying to be bad? Like, isn't this?
See, that's the thing. Like, watching it, I felt like it was like intentionally made to be bad for people to like it. And even like this guy here, this Trav Max Fun says, unpopular opinion, I like Justice League. I 100% agree with you. I actually really, really enjoy the Justice League film. Like, again, I know it's not perfect. I do know, it's got its problems, but I had a fun time with it.
I still don't fully understand why people hate Batman v Superman so much.
Oh,
like, I get 100%. Faults. I get a lot of the faults. Like when people say, "Oh, it's convoluted plot," like, gotcha, okay. It's not great. It has a lot of issues, but like people hate it. Like passionately hate it. Like I left the movie and I went, I was really excited about it. Wasn't so crazy about certain things, but mostly very positive whenever I first saw it. And then with the Ultimate Edition and even processing through other people's opinions, if anything, my opinion on it has only kind of gone up a little bit. Mm-hmm. And that's really like, I see this list of criticisms and I go, I'm tracking with what you're saying. I'm just not seeing the correlation where you don't see the positives that I see here too. There's a bunch of things here that I think are good that I don't know why you're not seeing that too. Yeah. However, Justice League is terrible. And if you don't agree with me, I'm leaving this stream.
Well, see, like I'm the same. I've actually enjoyed all of the DCEU films to an extent. I mean, I will willingly say another unpopular opinion people say about me, but I wasn't really big on Shazam. I didn't really think it was a funny movie, but for me, it didn't stick to me like BVS or even Wonder Woman or even Aquaman. I didn't think I was going to like Aquaman at all, because to me, he's just, I don't know. The way I always looked at it, I'm like, there's a superhero who can talk to fish, and they're going to make a movie about that.
Yep.
Okay, then let's go. Let's buckle up. Then it's phenomenal. Like, it's probably my second favorite out of all of them. I'll be honest, BVS, that's the top of my list. Like, I really liked it. I just can't get over the fact that Negan and Maggie are like a couple in there. Like, I can't get over that. It's just too weird for me. I don't know why I look at it that way, but I can't.
One way to see it.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of even what makes what frustrates me a little bit about some of the criticism of the DCEU is that they've taken some really ambitious swings, or they've really gone for the fences with some stuff, and they're willing to give their directors some freedom. And so you have very much more auteur kind of takes in some of this, and very different flavors. Aquaman, Shazam, Batman v Superman, those taste very different from one another. Those are very different. And it's also, I think, why Justice League is so frustrating to me, is that it feels like when I watch it, I just feel like I'm watching studio meddling. That's what I see on screen. And that really frustrates me. For all of Batman v Superman's faults, it felt very much like a Zack Snyder movie where maybe they told him to put a few too many things in there, but that it has the taste of Zack Snyder, just like this, what he cooks. That's what it is. His visuals, his style. And then Justice League for me didn't have that. It felt like he made a movie and then all the studio cooks got in there and they had their hand at it and they went, okay, now Joss, we're going to tell you what to do and you do your thing too. And so it took all the flavor out for me. That's why that movie, even like I did a video, my video that dropped today was ranking the final battles of the DCEU.
Yep.
And so I rewatched all of those a couple days ago, and I knew that there was a mandate to make Justice League under 2 hours. I did not realize that the movie was 1 hour and 59 minutes in 59 seconds.
Oh my, seriously?
Yeah. Like I looked at like the actual timer on it as I was like looking at it. Somebody was like, they actually did that. It's 1 hour, 59 minutes, and 59 seconds, which is to say that legitimately they just had to squish it in. And there's a certain degree to which like, it's even difficult for me to watch it unbiased without being just grossed out by that. How gross that is to have it mandated that to the point that it's like literally they went, just trim it. There. Okay, we're under. Good. Go for it.
I guess just to kind of, since we're kind of already on the topic, what's your thought about this whole like Snyder Cut ordeal?
I would love to see it. I love alternate vision cuts of movies. Not, director's cut with 2 extra minutes, or even they did that with Suicide Squad, but it wasn't really the director's cut. It's not like Batman v Superman, the Ultimate Edition felt like, oh, this is the actual movie they wanted to put out. The studio said, no, you can only have 2.5 hours, and so it feels like the proper version, and the 2.5 hour version just felt they had to cut too much. The Suicide Squad one just feels like 13 random extra minutes. That stuff doesn't interest me. But like the Richard Donner cut, that's interesting to me. Like when they legitimately have a competing vision for a film and 2 directors worked on it. That stuff is so cool. I love to see how that stuff plays out. And Zack Snyder, because he has such a distinct vision, I would love to see what he was actually trying to do with that movie, which is tough to even know with so much information, so many articles written in leaked things and pictures and everything. And we have the version that was put out there. It's still like, I don't know what this movie would have been or how it would have been different or I don't know. But it would have had a more unified vision. But beyond that, to add to that, his actual vision for it was 2 movies, and then they're like last minute, like no, 1 movie because we don't know what's going on here. And then they went, people didn't respond well to Batman v Superman because it's not funny enough like those MCU movies. Could you make this one funnier? And it's pretty well documented that they tried to do this stuff, even for his filming the stuff that he did. So the first trailer they put out at Comic-Con, was it Comic-Con 2016? They put out a trailer a year and 3-4 months before Justice League came out, and it was it like the white stripes, like, and there was still, even in that one, it was all jokes. Like, it was all these Bruce Wayne and Barry Allen quipping back and forth. And that was 6 months after Batman v Superman came out, and there was already a very different tone from what he had done before.
Yeah.
So I don't know if my take has always kind of been he never really got to make the thing that he was trying to do because there was so much last minute studio interference that kind of squished that thing away from his true vision for it. But I would love to see what he did make. And I would, even rewatching the final battles the other day, there's so many parts which is, it's so blatantly Joss Whedon humor. It just out of like just these little quips, these lines that are just, everyone is just too clever. And I love Firefly, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I'm a huge fan of his television work and the original Avengers, but it doesn't fit in the middle of a Zack Snyder otherwise directed film. And so, there's like the one that I thought was great that he clearly added was the Lasso of Truth, where Aquaman is just like telling his honest feelings, and Wonder Woman, you're so hot, and like, he died, and I'm glad I did something great, was a part of a team, and Batman's like, you're sitting on that. Like, that almost certainly was a Joss Whedon edition that's pretty good, but most of the other ones just felt out of place. So if you cleared that out of the movie, I'm just fascinated what it would be. What like the normal actual Zack Snyder view of this film would be. But will we get it? I don't think we'll get it anytime soon because it only puts WB in there's not really a win for them. I wouldn't think too much besides maybe sales. But other than that, if people like it more, then it puts them makes them look bad. Mm-hmm. People like it less. They're like, why did you even let him do this? Like, how did it's like a kind of, okay, so you had 2 bad versions of it. So I guess you guys really do suck. Like, what? There's not a win for them right now, but they put out the Richard Donner cut of Superman 2 just 25 years late. So maybe at some point in time we'll get it.
I mean, I'm curious to see it. I mean, you can definitely tell when you're watching it. It's definitely got a way more different tone than all the other ones. I mean, that's even similar with kind of leading us into our next topic, the Disney Star Wars stuff. I mean, obviously, The Last Jedi is obviously, either globally loved on one half and globally hated on the other. And it's definitely obviously got such a, different tone within it compared to like The Force Awakens.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Oh, and then just as divisive is Rise of Skywalker now. Different divisive, but just as much in a different group of people. There's not, it's so inconsistent as to who likes whatsy. And I've seen several people mention that this is one of the weirdest trilogies in recent history because each entry seems to actively dislike the one that came before.
Yeah.
There's clearly no unifying theme. So even if you enjoyed one of them or 2 of them, it's not like you could say that, yeah, but they did a great job building towards it. But Rian Johnson he messed it up. Like, no. I mean, it doesn't feel like JJ laid the groundwork for what he paid off in Rise of Skywalker either. It's more cohesive, but it's not. It still doesn't feel exactly like this is what he thought he was going to do back in 2015. And it's really tough to not just point the finger at Kathleen Kennedy and be like, all right, Lucas, you picked the wrong person to be your successor. She has an enormously long list of fantastic producing credits. She is not like an idiot. She is not a failure. It's not like she didn't have the resume to get that job. She got the job, and I don't think she did a very good job with it. I'm not sure why. Kevin Feige has been very successful doing the same thing with Marvel movies. He's done a lot more of them, and they've gotten much better reviews, and they're much more cohesive, and Endgame actually paid off, and he had a master plan that all this worked out. For whatever reason, making a fraction as many movies, they're all over the place. They're dividing the fan base. There clearly wasn't a game plan. Rogue One, Boba Fett, the Josh Trank one, Episode 9. What other ones had? Solo, of course. And then now the Game of Thrones guys are out. I mean, they've had as many directors drop out. They've had more directors drop out than they've had actual movies.
Mm-hmm.
And like you look at how many director dropouts, weird behind the scenes stuff have they had with the MCU? Not very many. You know, Patty Jenkins almost did Thor: The Dark World. There's one. They're supposed to do Inhumans, and that didn't happen. 2, kind of. Ant-Man. So 3 things out of 23 movies over a much longer period of time. And it's not even like they really rushed it. The acquisition happened in fall of October of 2012, and Force Awakens came out over 3 years later. Yep. So they had a 3-year ramp up to come up with a plan to, and JJ was hired right after that. JJ was brought in, I believe, January 2013. So he had 2.5 years to make that movie. And obviously from 2013 to this early this year is 6 years to come up with a plan. And they didn't do it. And you just like have to wonder, why did they did they just give Rian Johnson too much freedom and he wanted to do something different? Or like, what were they trying to do? Or I don't know. I would love to know why they made the decisions that they made, because why would you have Star Wars and not have a game plan? Or even for all the legitimate criticisms of the prequels, George had a very clear vision for the story he was trying to tell. Mm-hmm. Execution, problems. But like there's themes that run throughout, characters set up in the first one, it all goes somewhere. And then you watch the sequels and it's just stuff. Some of it's executed very well. Much of Last Jedi, for all my criticisms of, is directed very well. But you look at the actual arc of it, it's just all over the place.
Because I mean, I thoroughly, to me, I have mixed feelings on The Last Jedi. And I thoroughly really enjoyed The Rise of Skywalker. I'm going to say that right now. Yes, you can definitely tell there's problems. It's a very jumbled mess of just this stuff and fan service and trying to correct this, retconning that, trying to give us back kind of the same magic that the original trilogy had. I mean, unfortunately, we're never going to, get that same kind of magic, but I do really feel like JJ really, I feel like he set it up pretty good. Like, I actually think, even though everybody likes to say, it's just a retelling, rehashing of The Force Awakens.
A New Hope.
Oh, A New Hope. Sorry. Yeah. Wow. And
it is a telling of The Force Awakens.
Yeah, that
is The Force Awakens.
That is true. That is true. But like, for me personally, the way I look at it is, I think JJ wanted to give us something really familiar to kind of bring us back into that galaxy. And then Rian Johnson, he didn't like anything JJ did. He wasn't a big fan of Snoke. I mean, he officially killed Phasma. Not that she really did much in the previous movie to begin with either. Made General Hux into just basically a rag doll. Like, I've been talking about this stuff for well over 2-3 years now. And I even did a podcast on just talking about this kind of stuff anyway. And I do wish there would have been a plan, because overall, even though I have mixed feelings on The Last Jedi, I've enjoyed everything Disney's put out. I love The Force Awakens. It's my overall best movie theater experience I've ever had in my entire life. Of course, I left the theater at The Last Jedi just not knowing how I felt.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people have problems with the end of Rise of Skywalker, but I I bawled my eyes out when she said Skywalker, and I walked out the theater wiping my eyes, and everybody's like, that movie sucked. I'm like, hey, man, it might not have been your thing. Your end of the Skywalker saga can be Return of the Jedi. Even though I have my problems with that, I think it's a weaker film than some others. I actually have Rise of Skywalker literally right above the last Return of the Jedi, but I overall was very satisfied as a Star Wars fan.
Yeah, the analogy that I've used for that movie is, I don't mind the direction that they took the general plot lines. Bringing Palpatine back doesn't faze me at all. Mm-hmm. Like some people like, oh, this undermines what happened in Return of the Jedi. Oh, they're just doing it for cheap nostalgia. It's like, Palpatine goes all the way back to Phantom Menace. Like, he is the mastermind of the evil in this. So it makes a lot of sense that he would be very involved in this. Star Wars has always done kind of a small universe where everybody's kind of related to everybody else. And It's always been about lineage. And so a lot of it ties into it really. There's this way to make sense of it. Like, oh, just a cheap reason to bring him back. They don't even explain it. It's like, they don't need to. We're in a world where this is the guy that was behind a bunch of cloning, which we had a trilogy and TV show about that. Yep. And it's known for having force ghosts. So after people die, they still exist. There's no shortage of ways to like explain what exactly is going on here without needing to actually be like, here, let me explain it. Like maybe walk you through exactly how this transpired. So I didn't mind that. But it felt microwaved. Instead of properly slow cooking the plot elements that they had, it felt like they just kind of threw it in the microwave. So I much prefer my steaks grilled than microwaved. This felt like a microwave steak. Like, okay, I still like steak microwaved, but this is not the same thing as if you cook it right. That's what it was like for me.
Yeah, and I mean, I've been saying this for years, the sequel trilogy is not going to be for everybody. I mean, there are obviously hundreds of channels on YouTube, and they just, badmouth, bash it. Again, I thoroughly enjoyed it. But I guess kind of what my next question would be, do you think maybe it would have just flowed a lot better if JJ would have just had full control of the entire trilogy?
I think it would be much better. I mean, I just without question, that's what was missing is a singular vision for what they were trying to do. So even for JJ's fault, and he's not the best at landing the ship, and who knows what that would have looked like. I mean, that's what I don't get is that's what's so odd about it to me is that what did they think was going to happen if they made a trilogy like this? Like, what did they think? Like, all right, it's kind of like, hey, let me and you write a script, and I'll write 10 pages, hand it to you. You write the next 10 pages, and then hand it back to me. I'll write the next. Well, of course, that's not a great way to write a script if we're not talking to one another with a plan on how to do that. And that's what they did with these movies. And so, but I just think that unifying vision, either direction, really. If Rian Johnson had done 3 movies, or if JJ had done 3 movies, I think you would have had something that was properly elaborated on. And even stuff that I think people were frustrated by with The Last Jedi, it's because it just feels out of blue that we don't really get a proper elaboration on what his themes and stuff he was going for, because it just felt like JJ set one thing up, and then it's like Luke throws the lightsaber behind him and he's like, the Jedi need to die. They're a bunch of hypocrites. And like, whoa, what is happening here? And then, his entire plot line is resolved, and he's like, okay, I'll be a force ghost for one scene and sacrifice myself. I'll be a new type of hero that doesn't need to face people down with the laser sword. I'll just be a symbol of hope once again. And it's just like, it doesn't feel like we actually got to properly tell him whatever he wanted to do with all that. And then at the end, it teases like, children can all have the force and anyone can have it. And then it goes nowhere with that. And so if he had a trilogy to elaborate on this deconstruction, and I think there's some things you could do with that would be interesting. If you really look backwards and you said Luke Skywalker, after 30 years of reflecting, went, there was problems with what the Jedi did. That's why everything collapsed under their reign. If they were perfect, that wouldn't happen. That's an interesting idea. If you squeeze it all into one movie, and we think we're going in, oh, she's going to get trained to be the next Jedi, and then Luke that we've been waiting to see for 35 years is cranky. Well, it feels like a bait and switch.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously the sequels aren't very, popular with some fans, but it definitely seems like, The Mandalorian seems to be very, popular with a lot of people because it's something really, in my opinion, it's something original. You don't need Star Wars to have, the Jedi, the Sith, the Force. Like you can have a good, just grounded level, basic story. And I mean, we're getting a bounty hunter story. I mean, you do get, Baby Yoda, the child, whatever you want to call him. You get him with the Force showing you how to do things. And for me, I do want to see more stuff like that. Like I'd be interested in just a straight up like bounty hunters show. I mean, it could be a movie, a show, whatever. See it on Disney Plus because I'd like to see it with like, even though I'm not a big fan of him, I will say that right now. Boba Fett. You could have Bosk, Dengar, all the bounty hunters you see in Empire Strikes Back after they talk to Vader. You have the first episode take place right after that and have them just searching the galaxy for Han Solo. I actually think that'd be kind of a cool little concept kind of thing.
Yeah, so I think that's another thing that's been kind of frustrating to me about a lot of this era of Disney Star Wars. And Lucas did this too, but there was just such an emphasis on between Attack of the Clones and A New Hope. And it kept being about Rebels, the Alliance, and just this one window of time. And so you've got Clone Wars, Rebels, Solo, Rogue One. And so much of the output was just going back to the same aspect of the Star Wars universe. When the Star Wars universe is this big, it is massive. And we enjoy it not just because of the Galactic Civil War and the rise and fall of the Empire and stuff like that. Like it's interesting beyond that. And I think that's where the Mandalorian felt so refreshing. It's very simplistic storytelling. I mean, it's just a Western in Star Wars universe. And that's, to some ways, it's its biggest fault because, 4 of the episodes, they were kind of like standalone little Western templates translated into standalone little stories there. But that's kind of what people just wanted. They just want to go there and not feel like everybody's related to everybody else. And we're not in the middle of a civil war. It's not about Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. It's not like all the stuff that we love about Star Wars, but we've gotten that side of it a lot. And so now we just get to spend time in the Star Wars universe, just kind of like telling these little individual stories. And I think that was very refreshing for a lot of people. And, I know that's what I enjoyed about it is that like more time in Star Wars without the weight of all this mythology and answering things and all the divisive stuff. And I think that, when we've been waiting 35 years to see what Luke Skywalker's been up to, all of us want to see something a little bit different. Some people like, I want the most obvious version. He's awesome and he's going to tear down a bunch of guys. Like, that's what I want to see. Other people like, no. I mean, they need to subvert my expectations. It needs to be different. He needs to reflect it. Okay. Like all the, so you can't make everybody happy with someone that we all have an opinion on what that's going to be. And we've all been in our lifetime to see it. But do a new Mandalorian character and you can do whatever you want. And it's just fun to spend time in that world.
Yeah. And that's definitely the thing I like about it is it's, like I said, it's something like different. It's a different kind of story. And we get to see, some things we've seen before, but you also get to see really different parts of the galaxy. And you get to see kind of more of an in-depth look at like bounty hunting.
Yeah. The society. Like, what is Star Wars like, not just for Jedis and Jedi councils and people in a rebellion, but what is just these planets like? Mm-hmm. And I think that's when you can just spend some time in it and not move at this brisk blockbuster pace. And I think that's very refreshing. Even in some of the recent episode of Clone Wars, some of the stuff they've been doing with Ahsoka Tano, and she's on different levels of Coruscant, and it's really interesting because you're seeing the perspective from other people, and you go, oh, well, that's pretty cool. Like, that's neat, and that's what I hope that they can do more of that and really expand the Star Wars universe rather than like, all right, let's build another Death Star.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for me, like I've been seeing it a lot lately. People want to have like, and it's been rumored, I don't know if it's true or not, but a solo trilogy, Solo 1, Solo 2, Solo 3. I don't want that. I like how we got with Solo, we got an in-depth look at, smuggling. And like I brought up earlier, and I guess you can kind of consider Mandalorian, we're getting like a looks at like the bounty hunting side of the galaxy, but I'm more looking into like even like the crime lords, like
Right.
give us kind of a show. It doesn't have to be Jabba. I mean, obviously they really showed us a lot in Solo with Crimson Dawn and Darth Maul and all that. I mean, I can live without Darth Maul, but it'd be cool to see like the crime lords, like how do they do their thing? Like give us these different like jobs, like even like the spice miners on Kessel, like give us something different than just, again, Jedi, Sith, Empire, Rebels, all that stuff, and Civil Wars. Like,
yeah, and I think that's even, I think the fault in doing a Han Solo movie is that you're giving the origin story for a guy whose origin story was A New Hope. The whole point is that he's the guy that shoots first, and then by the end of it, he shows up to rescue these new friends that he made and becomes the guy that lived for himself, joins a rebellion. That's the origin story. So if you make him that guy before that, you undermine the character development that he had in that movie. And I think that, not that there's not interesting things to do, like if you did a lot like Han Solo, and I'm not proposing this as something I want, but you do a Han Solo series about the crime world where he's this smuggler, and that's what the show is, and it's spending a lot of time with the crime lords and digging deep into all that stuff rather than giving this elaborate origin story of how he was a good guy all along and his love life and where did he get his name from. No, that's not the part that we want to see. What we want to see is the world of crime in the Empire. Not
exactly.
The Empire's in the background. We're not in a rebellion. We're not fighting them, but they are the government at the time. We're learning about who are these people that he's doing jobs for and the intricate, like that's different and interesting, not just like, hey, let's want to actually watch the card game where he won the Falcon.
Yeah. I would have even been happy if, like you said, if they did that as like a TV series. I would have loved to have seen an entire episode of them just playing Sabacc, finding out how Han wins the Falcon.
Right. If it was a TV show, I would be totally on board with that because you can elaborate on any of these things. And you can have like an actual story as opposed to like, and now let's do a quick scene where he's got a card in his sleeve. Like that's not like, if you're going to do the story, I need to actually do the story. And, and I think that's, that movie, it just felt like they were just kind of, and I don't hate the movie at all. I enjoyed the movie, but it felt too much like they were kind of going from like, where do you get his name? Where do you meet Chewie? Where do you meet Lando? When do you get the Falcon? Now he just the Kessel Run.
Blaster.
How do you get his blaster? And you're just going, and where did he get the little dice that he hangs from? And it's like each scene introduces a new thing at a certain cadence. Like that's that. This is not. You're doing this the wrong way. You don't tell us an interesting story about this interesting character. You don't need to show us where he got everything.
Exactly. Like just give us a story. We don't need every little detail. Like, where would he get his boots? Where would he get his pants? Like, dude, just come on. Let's get this ball rolling here.
Where did he get the scar on his chin? That's what I really want to know. What point in time did he get the scar on his chin?
He stole Greedo's girlfriend.
Yes, there we go.
There we go. Perfect movie right there. I'm good. I'm ready to go.
Yeah, we can make that as a movie or season 2 of our Han Solo show that we're going to do.
All right, let's get to it. So, I guess I have kind of an interesting question for you. What are
Okay.
your thoughts on remakes / reboots?
I tend to not have strong opinions on some of that because the original one still exists. So even if we get a bad reboot, remake, a bland one, we still have the original. And so I just try not to get too worked about some of it. I get frustrated when they about 8 years ago, they did a couple of Paul Verhoeven remakes and Total Recall and RoboCop, and they got kind of, generic director person. They made them PG-13. And you just looked at it and you went, okay, these are obviously not going to do very well because you've taken all of the distinctives out of it. And so then they just feel like generic sci-fi movies that are lacking everything that made the originals really pop.
Yeah.
And they're just so sleek and so produced and designed and marketed and researched to appeal to the broadest audience that they really don't appeal to anyone in particular. Especially with ones like that, where it's like Paul Verhoeven is like makes these very hard R violent movies that are just like in your face. So the brand recognition of RoboCop and Total Recall, all of those people get mad when they see generic, slick remake of Paul Verhoeven movies. But I don't care that those movies exist, really. It annoys me that when Hollywood takes risks like that they're just so stupid. But that's generic frustration with Hollywood executives that just seem kind of dumb, that take all the wrong risks. And so that generally speaking, I like to think about a remake, reboot, whatever. There needs to be something that makes it worthy to tell again, or something about why the previous version isn't accessible now, or some new interpretation. So a foreign language film being remade in the United States, some people are like, the original's a masterpiece. Just release that in the US. Why don't they do that? Because not everybody likes to read a movie, and that's not unreasonable.
Yeah.
When people say that subtitles aren't a big deal, I get what you're saying, and but looking at the bottom of the screen while watching a movie, obviously that's not the best way to watch a film.
Yeah.
This isn't an in-depth analysis that if you're staring at words at the bottom of the screen, you're not appreciating the actual cinematography and filmmaking. Or if it's dubbed, then you don't have the performance. So I think reasons like that, that's pretty an obvious example. Or if the technology, the special effects can be dramatically improved, or if there's some change in society that makes the concept interesting again. So one of the ones that's my most divisive one that I always say would be an interesting movie to remake would be Back to the Future. And people get, what? Are you crazy? Back to the Future is a perfect film. What, you just want Marty McFly again? Is it going to be set in 1985 or 1950? Whoa. Hear what I'm about to say before you freak out too much. The inherent concept that makes Back to the Future so intriguing, built into it, is what if you met your parents when they were in high school? That's interesting. It's a timeless concept that is always can be refreshed.
Mm-hmm.
So a 1985 teenager going back to 1955 is interesting in one way. A 2020 high schooler going back to 1990 is interesting in a totally different way. I mean, there's a full generational shift since then because the movie came out in 1985 to the degree that the future in Back to the Future trilogy is now the past for us by 5 years. And so that's why it's an interesting concept. Now, would it be Marty McFly and Doc Brown? I don't know. But, I mean, you get Lord and Miller to make a movie about 2020 high schooler meeting his parents back in 1990 when they were in high school. You can immediately see oh, that's an interesting movie. Or if you just pitch it as Lord and Miller do a time travel movie about high schooler meets their parents in 1990, that's interesting. You call it Back to the Future and you're a heretic.
Yeah, that's for sure. Because, I mean, I keep seeing these made up videos, and I keep thinking about it because that's a movie I never thought about with a remake. But I've been seeing pictures of Tom Holland
and Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah, to an extent, I think that'd be kind of an interesting concept. But it's all you see though is Spider-Man and Iron Man. It's don't get me wrong, their chemistry was really good in the movies, but it's just I don't know, because I mean, I've got 2 movies on my list here that I don't ever ever want to see get remade. The first one, my favorite movie of all time, The Outsiders.
Okay.
I mean, for me, it's a timeless classic, and it's just really personal to me because it's kind of the book / movie that really brought me and like my friends really close together. The next one, they already talked about it, but I think as of now they canceled it, is The Crow. Because for me, the one with Brandon Lee, it's such a timeless classic, and it's just that era of when it was made, at that just dark gothic kind of thing. For me, I can't see Jason Momoa, playing Eric Draven being the Crow. It doesn't fit in my opinion.
And I mean, they essentially have done 3 different the continuations of it with different characters, and all of them terrible, TV show terrible. I don't know that I have any that I think are off limits. I think there's certain ones that are just like, I don't know. I can't imagine Star Wars ever being remade. That just seems like a bizarre concept.
Yeah.
But at the same time, when a movie's over 40 years old, you go, is it the craziest idea if 10 years from now they went, let's reboot the Star Wars universe? Because it's like, on the one hand, I think that's the craziest thing ever. Like, for its 50th anniversary, when you think this movie's thing is almost 50 years old, that's pretty crazy. Maybe you could do a Star Wars continuity that's a little bit more consistent. Feels like a heresy to me, but maybe.
Yeah.
I don't, I think like Jurassic Park, I don't know how you could make a better movie out of that. Like, I just don't, I would be okay like with a reboot, something of Indiana Jones, even though I think those are fantastic. But that's because I don't want you to do Raiders again. If you're like, we're going to redo Raiders with Chris Pratt, you go, that's a bad idea. But if they said, we're going to do kind of like what they did with Indiana, or what they did with James Bond, but we're going to get Oscar Isaac, and it's going to be in continuity with the other Indiana Jones movies. It's set in 1940, and you get, I don't know who you would get to do it, but I wouldn't have a problem with that. Just telling a different story with Indiana Jones in that time period with a different actor. I don't hate that. But like Jurassic Park, I think that's a specific story, because you remake a story, you reboot a continuity, and they've already kind of soft rebooted it with Jurassic World, but like a remake, the effects hold up, the characters are fantastic. Why would you do that? Kind of like with Jaws. Like, someone asked me a couple days ago, hey, do you think they should remake Jaws? What could you do with Jaws? Like, they try and turn it into a 21st century blockbuster, and it would be terrible, because that's not what it is. And so I think that's where I think some of these ones, it starts to feel like heresy, because there are these movies that were massive hits back in the day. Mm-hmm. And if they made them now, they'd try and turn them into a 21st century blockbuster. And their interpretation of that is that it has the spectacle, and we need to have the big slam bang finale. So, if they did remake Back to the Future, suddenly there's a high speed chase at the end of it. It's not Doc Brown trying to figure out how to plug a cord in while a timer's going down. Yeah. And the climax isn't Johnny Be Good at a dance. The climax, it has to be some slam bang crazy thing, because it's the 21st century and everything has to be bigger. And I think that's where I get somewhat scared with some of this stuff. But I don't have terribly strong actual negative opinions, because I still have my originals.
Yeah. Or even like sequels of like older films. Like, just recently, last year, November, I mean, they made Dr. Sleep, which is a sequel to Stanley Kubrick's 1980 classic The Shining. And at first, when I watched it, I didn't think it was, a true sequel to The Shining. But then when I bought it here recently on Vudu, and I bought the extended edition, added an extra like 30 minutes, loved it even more. I definitely think out of the 3 Shinings, overall, it's the best, because it's the best of both worlds. You get Kubrick's The Shining in there, plus you get Stephen King's novel, and you get just that perfect blend of it. And it's such a good movie.
Yeah, I I like the Doctor. I haven't seen the extended one yet, but I like Doctor Sleep more than The Shining. And I've always kind of told people, me and Kubrick aren't on the same wavelength. I'm just not wired for how allegorical and metaphorical he is, and the weird stuff. I'm just not wired that way. And so, I'm not trying to. He's a crappy. I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
But other people watch this stuff and go, "This is brilliant," and I watch it and I go, okay, I don't resonate anything with the stuff that other people see as brilliance. I just don't. I'm not wired that way. And so then Doctor Sleep, I felt touched on the stuff that I liked about The Shining and expanded that stuff. And even The Shining, the movie, is very much a Kubrick dramatic interpretation of Stephen King's source material. And even the themes in Stephen King's stuff, I like the ideas in there. A lot of stuff got lost, and that's in Doctor Sleep. And so that one, I liked it. It was also like, kind of like X-Men, except interpreted by Stephen King.
Yeah.
And but also a very personal story too, about family and legacy. And I loved all that stuff.
Yeah, it definitely was. It exceeded my expectations. Like, I love The Shining. It's my favorite horror movie all time, but I will definitely say Doctor Sleep definitely went above and beyond of what Kubrick did for his film. So, Sean, I guess a few things we didn't touch on, but that's okay. If you're ever at all interested, I'd love to have you back at some point. And do you got any final words, final comments, anything like that?
It's been fun just actually having the back and forth, as I always say, as I mentioned, when it's even discussing it on comments or direct messages, it doesn't have the same appeal as talking to a person because tone is lost. And so when you can actually have the organic back and forth talking movies, and especially stuff like Star Wars that both of us grew up loving and are such a big part of our love for movies and why we do this stuff. It's always fun to get to talk to someone that likes to exchange ideas. So it was fun.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'd love to have you back. I really think we could have another really good podcast. We could talk about the MCU or whatever.
That's right. We didn't really even get to the MCU.
Hey, man, that's okay. Like I said, come on back. We'll have a 5-hour podcast about it.
Woo!
Woo-hoo. So, all right, guys, that is going to do it for the Midwest Cantina podcast. I want to thank Sean Chandler once again for being here. Make sure you guys head on over, check out his channel. I did link it down in the description below. He's a great guy. Makes a lot of great films, or a lot of great videos, sorry, Mr. Filmmaker.
I consider them films.
And definitely make sure you guys check out his podcast weekly alongside Griffin Schiller. And with that, you guys, make sure you guys hit that like button and subscribe, and we'll see you later.